Hi, this is John Schmitz for the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. And tonight we have a special episode. This is about business neighborhood services. It is a department of the city government here in Indianapolis. And over the years, I have been fighting with these people over all sorts of permitting issues and systems and how they do things and the extortion and the corruption and all of those things. Tonight, I put together a little expose of some of the shenanigans that this department has been up to. And one of the reasons why I actually started doing our own shows back, it's been almost 5 years. So we are almost to the 200th episode of the Mouthwash Talk Show. We've been covering local politics and issues that have been going on here in Indiana, mostly. Sometimes we get to the federal level, but for the most part, it's local stuff. And the reason I think our show is doing well is because a lot of the mainstream media or local media, they just don't cover things that are really important to day-to-day citizens' lives. And if you've had to get a building permit in Marion County, you know what I'm talking about. Either they give you a smooth rubber stamp, we don't care what you're doing, or they put you into the vortex of misery and they just terrorize you to get these things done. And it's, frankly, as I've dug into this, it is a very understaffed, poorly run, poorly supervised department that just sort of runs itself. It's like ghost riding a bike. It just sort of runs off on its own. So we're going to highlight a couple of those things tonight. I got a couple of interviews here with some people and some sad stories about people that have tried to improve their properties here in Indianapolis and have gotten nothing but harassment. So let's get to it. And I hope you enjoy the show tonight.
All right, I'm standing here behind the Arts Center, and this is a house that was torn down and rebuilt over the race day weekend 3 years ago. And as you can see, we have some aging stop work orders here. This individual does not want to be on camera because they are afraid of retaliation, and there's still some ongoing litigation in court. And we've been trying to get a permit for this gentleman for 3 years. The city finally came back, sued him in court, and basically told him he needed to put it back to its original condition. Well, heroin addicts and dirt floor is not really what the original condition that we want. So we're trying to get them to define what is original condition. Is it tear it down? Do you need a permit to tear it down? Because now you need a demo permit. Or can we leave it up until because it's secured, can we leave it up until the floodplain gets straightened out? Because that's the general rule that's the problem with this house. You cannot fix your house up for more than half of its assessed value one time in the lifetime of owning the house. So it really limits what you can do in a floodplain. And that's all fine and good if you're up on the laws and up on the rules. But if you're a gentleman that just wants to improve a house, maybe the city doesn't want that to happen. So they'll take their time and they'll sue you, and you'll spend a lot of money. And now this house is probably going to have to be torn down. All right. We're out here watching the house get torn down behind the Mars Hill Arts Center. And there's the owner of the house watching his house be torn down. And I want to give a special shout out to Congressman Andre Carson, who did absolutely nothing to help with this situation that is all floodplain related. He's had 16 years to straighten this floodplain out, and he's failed to do so. So now this poor guy right here gets punished for it. Oh, and I don't want to be remiss in leaving out Justin Moad, who is our state rep, who could care less about this. And, it's good. So that's why you got to get out and vote for people that care about what's going on here, because I could fix this floodplain issue. But these elected officials, they don't feel like they need to listen to your average citizen. And as you can see, it is finished. The house is gone. I'm here in front of a building in Mars Hill that's been boarded up for quite a few years. Part of the issue with this building and why it is still boarded up is the owner doesn't want to go through the permitting process. They don't want to go through the hassle because of the stories that they've heard. And also this building is in the floodplain, which has a whole another layer of bureaucracy and red tape. So this building will just remain boarded up until some things change. We
For those of you that don't know about FEMA, FEMA stands for Federal Emergency Management Administration, and these are the folks that come in after disasters and they help the people and they give them what they need. And maybe recently you remember the Helena aftermath of all the rains that just destroyed several towns, and FEMA came in and they were flooded. They were flooded out. Now I don't know if these were in flood plains. And that's what FEMA does. They go around, they draw up these maps where people are prone for flooding, and then they make them have flood insurance, and there's different restrictions on how they can build. And how the rules work is that you can only do half of what your property's been assessed for one time, and it's over major improvements. Now, if you have a bad roof or some siding that's off, you can do that. You can fix that. So it's called maintenance. But if you want to try to improve your property or add something on, no go. You can't do that unless you get the blessing. So, needless to say, a lot of folks in these floodplains are poor. I mean, most of the people I know, especially those here in Mars Hill, as we saw the gentleman that had his house torn down, and the other person that won't build because of the restrictions, things just stay boarded up and neighborhoods stay depressed and neighborhoods stay down. Now, in some cases, there's remediation that can be done to get folks out of the floodplain. And what happens is you do this remediation and you prove that it gets them out of the floodplain, and then they're out of the floodplain. So that's what we're trying to do here in Mars Hill, but we cannot get that done because our city officials and state officials and federal officials, they're not real. It's not their house, not their problem. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of background on what FEMA is and how it works and how it can be used to oppress people in poor neighborhoods. Now, here's another gentleman that's been abused by the city. Well, let's listen to Ray Peck's story.
With Ray Peck, and he's had a very interesting experience with the city over the past 6 or 7 years, and it's finally been drawn to a conclusion. But I wanted you to hear his story. Ray, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was quite the nightmare getting through business and neighborhood services. And what's kind of funny, almost a slap to the face, is they used to be called Indianapolis Code Enforcement. But they decided to change their name to Business and Neighborhood Services. It has been an absolute nightmare. Thankfully, it's finally over after 6.5 to 7 years. But we learned a lot about bureaucracy, specifically Indianapolis bureaucracy, and specifically how horrible it can be, just over the top horrible.
All right, Ray, tell us just briefly, what happened to you? How did this all get started?
Well, we were rebuilding a patio probably about 7.5 years ago. And we were rebuilding it on the same place, same spot. When we bought our house, there was a patio on a 25-foot section. We live on Geist Reservoir, so we have 25 feet of lakefront. And again, we bought it and there was a patio. So we rebuilt it about 12 years ago, and then rebuilt it again about 7.5 years ago. And again, same spot, same kind of footprint, more or less, and everything was fine. And we had a neighbor who, everyone's had one of those neighbors who caused problems. He came down and screamed and yelled. The city ended up coming out, and they sent building inspectors. And this was during construction. So our construction crew came to a screeching halt. I bet there were 7 or 8, men there working, including the owner of the company was there. And the building inspector went through, and they talked, and they looked at the schematics, and they hemmed and hawed and looked at everything and took a look at the whole place. And everyone was gathered around the building inspector, and he said, "You're fine. You don't need any permits. You can continue building without delay." And we said, "Great, perfect." And we kept building, not surprisingly. I mean, who wouldn't? Another day or so came by, and another building inspector showed up, and the same thing happened. Looked around, shrugged their shoulders, and said, "Yeah, you're fine." And they put this in their reports. And eventually we had 3 of those guys do that. And what happened was, about 6 weeks after the project was done, the city of Indianapolis, Business and Neighborhood Services, came back and said, "We changed our mind, you're going to have to remove it." I said, "Is this a joke?" And they're like, no, you didn't get permits. I said, "You told me not to get permits." "Well, I think we told you to get permits." I said, "No, it's in your reports." And I got copies of the reports, and it said no permits needed, investigation closed. And I said, "Well, you said this. You said we didn't need them." "Well, we changed our mind." I said, "You can't change your mind. We built a patio based upon your approval." And they were puzzled. They were and we said, "We're not tearing it out." we have like 8 or 9 witnesses, and I mean, there was no doubt in their mind that they approved it, but they thought it was appropriate to change their mind. So anyway, we fought them for 7.5 years, and they kept telling us to do things, and we would do them, and then they would change their mind. They would come back and say, hey, no, that's not going to work. I said, but you told us to do it, and that's what we did. And what we learned is just how appallingly inefficient and ridiculous a lot of the building codes are, and a lot of, not just the building codes, but the bureaucracy. Some of the building codes make sense. I mean, you don't want to build a nuclear power plant in a school playground, and you don't want someone to build a house that's going to fall down. But then again, when it gets ridiculous, a lot of the bureaucracy gets over the top ridiculous, and the problem you have is a lot of bureaucracy in Indianapolis has horrible turnover, amazing turnover. You'll never talk to the same person twice. They have up to 50% turnover in a given year. And yeah, you heard that right, 50%. And when you deal with them, you'll ask for Joe, who stopped by last time, and Joe's no longer there, and now it's Bill, and now you have to talk to Bill, and Bill's only been there for a week and doesn't know anything. And he's going to have to talk to his boss, and his boss has been there 2 weeks. So you find out in a hurry that bureaucracy exists for itself.
So Ray, this took how many years? Like 6 or 7 years to get this all straightened out. You just have recently gotten this done. How much money did you spend fighting these folks?
Oh my gosh, just in legal fees, well over $100,000. I mean, if you're getting a lawyer, the old expression, talk is cheap, they've never had a lawyer. And you've got to get a good one, too. If you think good lawyers are expensive, wait till you find out what bad ones will cost you. You've got to get lawyers. And the government has unlimited lawyers. They have all the lawyers they will ever need. Theirs are free. They don't care how much they have you spend.
Indianapolis City County Councilor Michael Hart has tried to help me over the years, try to get some stuff straightened out with BNS. Actually got me set up with some meetings with the director and with the people that make the policy. And we were making some progress with them, but they quit. And as you can see in Ray's interview, that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of turnover. Well, there is a lot of turnover. And you know what? Consistency and communication are very important if you want to try to build an organization that works. So, hey, here's an interview with Michael Hart. We're going to talk about the system.
So I'm here with Michael Hart. He's a councilman for the city of Indianapolis, and he is very, very in tune with trying to make processes better. When I think of Michael, I think of somebody who's going to make a system and make it better. It's like that old Memorex tape. We don't make the sound, we just make it better. That's Michael Hart. And we've been working together for a little while on trying to get the permitting process streamlined, or at least improved, or at least palatable, so that you could go and get a permit without this tremendous hassle and problems. So we first started together. We went down and we talked to Brian Madison about this permit process. And I had come up with a proposal, and I called Michael, and I said, hey, I can get you in and we can talk about this proposal and maybe get going on maybe making some things. So Michael, tell me a little bit about the process and what we went through to get that started.
Yeah, we actually had a couple because we actually met with the Office of Audit and Performance first, and we asked them to actually go through the process. And if you recall, we actually asked them to put out a study on the process, and in which it took them over 2 years to produce that result. And then even that result was, I mean, it was laughable at the end of the day, right? What the ask was, hey, give us the process of, creating a bill, right, as you would say, but take that story and create the permitting process. And so we took it from there. Then we moved to talk with Brian Madison to say, hey, look, we've got some ideas. There are clearly issues. It takes a long time to get somebody out. When they do, they're not always the most qualified individual, and they're tagging things that aren't necessarily the things that are even being called out to be looked at. And then there's fines associated with it, projects that are being delayed, impacts to communities and development, and all these sorts of things. And so we had the meeting, and then shortly thereafter, Brian Madison wasn't the director anymore.
Well, he got us a meeting with Joe Glass, which was one of the auditors for the city. And by gosh, we're going to have this fixed by Labor Day. How many Labor Days ago was that? That was 2 Labor Days ago. We're going to have fixed. And here we are, we're still having problems. And you're going to see, we're going to have other stories here that are ongoing that are just, it's just hard to fathom how the city treats people that are trying to improve their homes. So Michael, what we talked about, ways to solve these problems, because it's great to complain. I think I'm pretty good at it. But where are we in the process now? Are you seeing anything being done?
A little bit is being done. So where I've been harping on the process is from a software perspective. So my background is in IT, and I quickly realized when you go through the permitting process, you don't just deal with BNS, right? You deal with DPW, you deal with BNS, you deal with development corporation, like all sorts of folks, right? And so this communication has to travel on the back end. Well, they use different pieces of software on the back end. Some of them use Salesforce, some of them use Acela. There may be a third tool in there that they use as well.
It depends on who donates the most money.
Right. I hear it depends is a very famous saying in BNS. Yeah. But at any rate, and so, where I was pushing on the city for a couple years was, let's get everybody on the same system so we're all talking the same language. Unfortunately, it didn't end up that way.
No.
What ultimately happened is the city ended up sticking with the same tool that they use, which is Acela. They did improve it in a sense where they were having a lot of issues, both on the constituent side. So if you're, anybody who's living in Indianapolis and wants to look something up, you use this web portal called Acela. It is not user-friendly by any means. And it was an old version that was maintained, all the software was maintained at the city of Indianapolis, not in the cloud. And so what the city decided to do is migrate from the on-prem version to the cloud version with the effort of getting all these new updates that they were leaving out. So that has been the change. It wasn't the change I'm happy that there has been change in the direction, but it still didn't solve the problem of all the systems talking on the same language, but it should make it better for end users when submitting these things. Time will tell, right? You can put out a goal, but we won't know until we get actual feedback from people that are using this tool in the field.
Right. I tried to use the Acela to help another person with the permitting process. I couldn't. It wouldn't work. I couldn't upload the plans. It was just very cumbersome, and I'm a guy that pulls permits that does this, and I'm also an old school guy that likes to go in person and turn my plans in and that type of thing. But this is unacceptable on how to get things done. And then you hear Brian Madison had the same talking point so many years ago. 18 days to turn around a permit, and then I just heard the mayor talk about 18 days to turn around a permit 4 or 5 years later. That gives an indication that there's nothing being done. There's no concern with this. And honestly, permits are on a person by person basis. So it's not a group of people. So it's basically you're singled out like a sheep and you're like separated from the herd, and then you're picked on. And you're going to see some stories today of what this system is doing to our city and why we don't have some of the building projects that maybe we need to alleviate some of this rental situations and home situations. So Michael, is there anything you got on the horizon as far as the next step for this?
So I've started the Artificial Intelligence Commission, and
I'm sorry, I got to do a joke with that. Is government has artificial intelligence because it ain't there. It's artificial. Never mind. It's like fake flowers. I'm sorry. I can't help it.
You're fine. So I'm always optimistic in improving the process, right? So we're halfway through. We actually have an interim report this evening in the rules committee that will be delivered, and we're asking actually to extend that commission until January of next year because we really just have the foundation laid. Where I'm still optimistic with using technology, which is the background, so I'll always try and use that as much as possible. But I don't have the answer of what it is, right? But I'm hopeful that we can start to use new technologies to start taking a step back and improving the efficiencies. And so what I mean by that is artificial intelligence, when it comes to processes, doesn't replace any humans. The goal is that you can improve the efficiency. So if you normally need 10 people, you can do 10 people work with 7 people.
Yeah. Well, we could call it artificial enhancement. How about that? I mean, maybe we get Viagra to sponsor the thing. But yeah, we need to use technology. And I've noticed over the years that government does not keep up with the times. You can still fax things too there. And I get that. There's old people like me that have fax machine. That's all I have. But this is one of the things that I've followed you, Michael, and this is one of the things that impresses with me. You are going to get to the bottom of it. You're going to work on it, and you're going to ask the right questions. I just wish we could get the rest of the government to follow along, and maybe as watching this, maybe you can help us along with that by getting a hold of your councilman and saying, hey, we want things fixed for our citizens. So, Michael, I thank you for the time, and I'm sure we'll be in touch because I know we're trying to get some stuff done. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
And last but not least, but here is some harassment that I endured from the city back in 2019 when I had a little building project going on here when I tried to do an addition on my house. I got nothing but hassled from the health department, from the city. And it just really was, well, hey, take a look at this little clip here where I had 2 inspectors couldn't wait to come bust my chops.
All right, 1 inspector left.
I guess I'm next in line.
And now we got the next inspector.
We got a call regarding open burning of illegal material on site. You guys got a fire going?
It's in a barrel.
All right, well, do you mind if I take a look at
Yeah, let's go look at it.
So in the city of Indianapolis, residents are allowed to burn horizons, twigs, and branches. Anything like treated wood or...
No, we're not burning anything like that. No.
And that'll do it for this special edition of the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit of things about some of the departments in our city that just run themselves without leadership. It's important, folks, if you get out there and vote for people who know what they're doing and that will follow through with what they know.